Good morning. Today is Monday, the 16th of February. We are disregard that. We are 3/4 of the way through February already. It is,
Happy President's Day.
oh yeah, El Presidente, Mr. Trump. Happy President's Day, everybody. What do we celebrate on President's Day? Besides like the
A
president.
day off, yeah.
Oh. So I hope you're enjoying the day off, which means potentially people may be listening to this on Tuesday. So let me do a greeting with, today is the 17th of February, Tuesday.
Happy Lunar New Year.
So today we're talking about something very interesting. Speaking of February, the reason why I said we are 3/4 of the way through February is because that brings to mind calendars. We were talking about the Christian calendar this morning. Do we subscribe to it? Do we not? Why are we not having an Ash Wednesday service this year? That's a question.
No, we're having a
it's
Wednesday service.
Well, it's kind of like a Wednesday service.
We're having a no Ash Wednesday service.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Beginning of
not
Lent,
really
yeah.
like an Ash Wednesday, though. And so perhaps that's a question that we may have. We'll talk about all those things a little bit more. Happy Lunar New Year, everybody. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang. We have with us Pastor Eugene, and we have with us everybody actually here that's involved with this ministry. We have Junzak, Brian, and David with us as well. And we're recording Full House today. So
Who's David?
So we have with us David, who's actually been editing our podcast. So thank you, David, for everything.
Speaking of, I think he's good enough to do what John Woo did.
Who's John Woo?
He's director of Face Off with Nick Cage and John Travolta, where they take each other's face and then put it on the other person. I think he'll put your face on my face and my face on yours for the whole episode.
No,
I think he could do it.
David could do something like that. He does some weird stuff sometimes. So
He did Mission Impossible.
John Woo or David? We are coming upon the season of Lent in the Christian calendar, which normally would kick off with Ash Wednesday. But as you have read in your bulletin or you have seen in the announcements, we are having a Wednesday service, but to my understanding, with no Ash this year. So we are kicking the Ash. And so that got me thinking, perhaps our people would want to know why that's the case, because I think whenever a tradition changes, there's always a reason. And so I thought we could explore that and on a grander, perhaps bigger scale, talk about the Christian calendar as a whole. What do we subscribe to? What do we not? And where does it all come from? All that fun stuff. So I think just to kind of start us off, I know that there's a change in our normal service, which would be on a Wednesday, Ash Wednesday. But we're not doing that this year. So where did that change come from?
It's part of our understanding of the regulative principle of worship. Okay?
Yes, but I guess but we've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing a lot of things for so long, and we reform, we change according to our understanding of the Word of God. And so, I believe historically it was
Thomas Cranmer.
who, stopped the ashes, or they call the cessation of ashes in 1547. So 30 years after the Reformation. So even, for 30 years, people were doing ashes and things like that. And then stopped it with our understanding of, what the regulative principle is, what is commanded in the Bible. And if it is a tradition, then we check it against the Bible. Is this a biblical tradition, or is it a man-made tradition that veers us away from the biblical understanding of the regulative principle or the worship principle that we see in the Bible?
So I did want to ask that question in regards to the Christian calendar, because when we think about regulative principle, we talk about how we worship in the way that God has prescribed us to worship according to his word. That's the regulative principle, right? There are no commands, let's say, outside of the gathering of the saints, as we read in Hebrews, and in the book of Acts that we see. There is no real command for us to celebrate Christmas. There is no command for us to celebrate Easter except for Resurrection Sunday, which every Sunday is. And so where do we get all of this from? So even with Lent, right, leading up to Easter, there is no biblical mandate for us to celebrate or to observe Lent. And so if we're going by the regulative principle, why should the Christian calendar even exist? Where does that even come from? What is the source of the Christian calendar? I guess we could just start from there.
Yeah, so when we first started doing Lent as a church, I remember I was reviewing all the church calendar, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And I remember deciding on keeping Ash Wednesday. Yeah, that was a pretty tough decision because I was like 50-50 on it. For years, I was 50-50. I saw the benefits of it. So I would share the benefits of Ash Wednesday or the service on Ash Wednesday. And then, I wouldn't necessarily go into all the things that detract from worship if we were to follow certain traditions, like the imposition of ashes. But when you talk about the regulative principle, what is commanded and what is absolutely, something that we must follow is Sunday.
Yes,
Sunday is the absolute must
Yep.
for Christians or Reformed Christians, confessional Christians. This is where we call that Sunday Resurrection Day.
Yep.
So Sunday is Resurrection Day. I know some people call it Resurrection Sunday. That's unnecessary to say Resurrection Sunday. It's just Resurrection Day. That's Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. So on Resurrection Day, we meet and we celebrate Resurrection Day every Sunday.
Yes.
So once a week, the saints gather together and they worship on Resurrection Day or Sunday. And that's fine to say Sunday instead of Resurrection Day. The Puritans didn't want to celebrate any calendar because they wanted to really get into the core, the bare bone structure. Let's make it as fundamental and as foundational as possible, what is commanded in the Bible. But that's not necessarily the Reform view. I hope that makes sense. Yep. The Reform view is not necessarily what the Puritans all adhered to, right? And so the Puritans wouldn't even do anything else except Sunday worship on Sundays.
And fellowship,
eating
they
together.
Bread.
How some people go shopping, they wouldn't. I think we covered this.
Yeah.
They wouldn't go shopping. They wouldn't go have a kid's birthday party. They would do nothing.
Lawn bowling.
No sports. No Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, you wouldn't celebrate the Super Bowl. You wouldn't. Yeah, Super Bowl is like lawn bowling in a sense, right?
Yeah.
What'd you say? Super bad? So we don't necessarily go with, but I like to think that we would mix in some elements of classic reformers and the Puritans.
Okay, yeah.
In our understanding of, let's say, traditions, what we could do on Sunday, and church calendar as well. I hope that makes sense.
So I think one of the accusations that people have, like these are like the Presbyterians, like these are like the Presbys. They'll say, the Christian calendar is a Roman Catholic thing. We don't abide by that. That's why we don't do Ash Wednesday. That's why we don't do Lent. We are given the freedom to fast whenever we want. We don't have to do all these things. And so growing up, even there are people that said Christian calendar, no, thank you, because that's Roman Catholic. Is there any validity to that?
Yeah, there were a bunch of. That's what the Puritans did.
Yeah,
there are a bunch of reformers too that didn't want to adhere to any calendar except Sunday.
Right.
And so that's what I'm talking about. And some people, really wanted to follow a lot of the traditions, saying we can't throw out everything. That's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And so we should keep the good stuff after, obviously, is measured against the word. So, in the Old Testament, people followed calendars. And so in the New Testament, do we have zero calendar except, seasonal calendars except Sunday? Is that how we ought to live? And so there's been debate on that. I don't mind if a church says we're only going to do Sunday. And if it so happens that I'm going to do a sermon on, the
Nephilim.
I was going to say the incarnation.
Oh.
And it falls on Christmas Sunday, then so be it.
Yeah,
but I shouldn't be held to preaching on the incarnation of Christ only on Christmas Sunday.
Right.
I should be able to preach on it anytime we want. Or the resurrection, which should be preached on or alluded to at least every Sunday, because that's why we're gathered together.
But there are certain pastors and certain churches in which they'll say, you know what? Like you said, every Sunday is the pinnacle of the week. That's the pinnacle of the year. And so we treat every Sunday as if it's Easter, as if it's Christmas, because we talk about Christ every Sunday. And so by using, Lectio Continua, we just preach through the word, and I know that our church history professor at Westminster, Carl Truman, who is currently over at Grove City, currently at Notre Dame, on loan, as they say, he would preach through the Old Testament during, he would just go straight on through during Christmas and preach about things that you normally wouldn't really hear on a Christmas Sunday, because the whole point was we're preaching through the Bible. The entire word points to Christ, and therefore this would relate to Christ as well. Now, is there value in that? Like, do we always have to preach the incarnation on Christmas Sunday?
Absolutely not. Right. And so I was someone that read Carl Truman's works, his blog posts and things like that on this topic. And I really respect his opinion. I just didn't adhere to it in its fullness. I hope that makes sense. And
he has changed his mind. To your
point, he did change his mind recently.
Yep.
And he said, we all got to repent or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so people change their minds. We change our minds. I've changed my mind on a ton of topics, even in the past few years of doing the podcast. Let's say we, talk about certain, controversial issues. I may have changed my mind over the past few years, but it's not. So what's the reason for changing your mind? Is it pointing to scripture, or is it pointing to modern day culture, right?
Yeah.
Are you changing because you're trying to, conform to the culture of the world, trying to appeal to it? Or are you changing your mind because the Bible is more clearer on this aspect, and it seems that we should go ahead and, reform ourselves toward that area?
So I guess with that being said, what is our church's stance on the Christian calendar? I think some people might be wondering, again, because of, our change with Ash Wednesday, and why do we choose to follow certain dates and not others?
So I'll tell you what Carl Truman said recently, since you brought him up. He said he really likes the Advent calendar because that's probably the only time in the year you get to sing one of the most glorious hymns ever made. With this, like, "Oh, come all ye faithful."
Hark the herald angels sing.
And "Hark the herald angels sing."
Yeah.
One of the most glorious hymns. And we sing it once a year, at least once a year, because of Advent.
We should do it more, though.
I think so. And so, I made the comment even in our church, just because we sang "Hark the herald angels sing" once, it doesn't mean that you can't do it again the next Sunday.
Yeah.
You could do it every single Sunday. I don't care. It's a great song.
Yeah.
Or "Oh, come all ye faithful."
Yeah.
Great song.
What about Little
Great
Drummer
hymn.
Boy?
Little Drummer Boy is not really a hymn, but maybe to you.
It's up there, though.
Maybe that is you. You're a little drummer boy. That's why you mentioned it.
That bum.
Yeah. Maybe when "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" is playing, you just go pa-rum-pum-pum by yourself in the back. But, I think that is really a case for church calendar where you get the whole church to focus and devote themselves, discipline themselves toward one thing, to one goal. Obviously, you're supposed to do it all year long, but there is a particular season in which you could especially do it. So people are like, well, the Puritans might have argued that you should be doing this every day. But reality is, not everybody does it every day, and not everybody can do it every day, even though they ought to. And so church calendars help us focus on certain aspects. So to your example of Lent, it really is a time of introspection, of, really thinking about the passion of Christ, preparing myself to go through, what Jesus went through, and then really celebrating on the resurrection day we call Easter. We should do that every week. However, there is a special season where we can all get together and prepare ourselves together. And so Lent is a very special season that we can do that. Advent is a special season where we could really focus on the incarnation of Christ. There's so many good things about that. So I would say, while it is not mandated, it is preferable that your whole church goes to it or through it.
So I guess with that, it brings up the question of, what if this year I just didn't partake in Lent, in the sense of maybe, what if this year I didn't fast? Is that wrong for me to do? Like, what if I didn't go to Ash Wednesday service? Is that the same as me not going to Sunday service? Is it, like, how are we supposed to think through that?
Well, if your church does it, you should go. I get it that people have their own convictions and things like that, but if your church does it, there is that spirit of solidarity and unity you want to always hold, especially if it's not something that is not conscience binding, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's just like, I don't really feel like it, I don't care what you feel like. If the church is doing something, you should join alongside it. Like, the men are gathering for a retreat. We should go to a retreat. I don't really feel like it. I would say to the person or the man, who cares what you feel like? The church is doing this. You should follow along. And if you have any criticisms for Brian, like, tell him. But not to attend is far worse than, to attend and then give some quiet criticism or some, what did Michael Scott call it? Constructive criticism. And,
I mean, you said Brian because Brian is in charge of our men's ministry. Just wanted to kind of put that out there for people that may not know.
Yeah.
It's because of,
But it doesn't matter what event. And, so if the church decides, let's do this Lenten season together, I think there is something to, as soldiers falling in line and doing it with the church. But if your conscience forbids you, like, Lent is the most evil thing in the world, I don't know, for some reason you've come to this conviction, then I would say you need to talk to your pastor and make sure he understands these convictions. We have a few Baptist brothers and sisters here in our church, and they've shared their convictions with me. They're still in our church, you know what I mean? But they shouldn't like hold back and, kind of look every time he talks about, infant baptism and references the covenant, they're going to be like all angry, right? That's not how it works. So, I think the question in itself can be troubling if the person that is not participating in a church event is not participating in it because he just doesn't feel like it. Yeah. If it's conscience binding for you, I get it. But talk to your pastor, talk to an elder. But if it's not, then what are you getting so worked up about? Just join in and participate. Participation is very, very important for the church. So I hope people take that. And if your church doesn't do Ash Wednesday or Lent or whatever it is, then don't do it by yourself either. Don't go be like, I want to do this, that kind of thing. Just show up on Wednesday by yourself and impose ashes on your forehead. But I mean, I think that's the same thing. That's, for me, that feels like the same thing where you just want to stand up and do whatever you want.
It's the other way
and
around.
I don't think that's a healthy attitude to approach anything.
So I guess some people would understand if we didn't do the Christian calendar at all. Some people would understand if we did do all of it. But we do Ash Wednesday, but we don't do, for example, a Maundy Thursday service, right?
We can. So I was thinking about it this year. Maybe we should do a Maundy Thursday dinner.
We could?
We could.
Yeah.
And then on Good Friday, normally it is tradition to fast.
Through Saturday to Easter, right?
To Easter. But then, Presbyterian churches do, some of them have a Maundy Thursday service. The reason why we don't say, broadly speaking, all churches should do this is because I do think that there is Christian freedom among local churches to, either decide to do this or not to do this, okay? So I wouldn't necessarily judge a church for doing Maundy Thursday dinner and service and not a Good Friday service, for example.
Right.
Because Good Friday, you just want to, be contemplative and just stay home, perhaps, or something like that while you're fasting, perhaps, right? Or you have a Good Friday service. But no matter what the thing is, the pastor of your church should be teaching you why we are doing certain things. Why are we doing this event? In our church, we do Advent, and sometimes we haven't done Advent. If you remember, sometimes I just went straight through. And I just said Merry Christmas, and then boom, we just preached what was next on the sermon. Or sometimes we wouldn't do Advent, and just on Christmas Sunday we would do one Christmas sermon, and then move on there. So we've done it all, where we celebrated Advent, we didn't do Advent, we didn't even do Christmas. We just said Merry Christmas and moved on. And so I don't think it's binding in the sense where you have to do something, but when you do something, I think it's important that there's a purpose to it, and I think that's part of the Christian freedom that we have as churches. And again, this is not talking about an individualistic kind of freedom where you're free to do whatever you want, but churches together have the freedom to either go through a seasonal calendar, or they can just go straight through, like you said, the
full Christian calendar.
Yeah, the full. What is it? Lectionary.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, the lectionary. So for our church's context, right? We kind of talked about just broadly, I guess, in the evangelical circle. In our church's context, what is the process in which we choose to observe and not observe certain church calendar days? Like, I'd brought up Maundy Thursday because prior to this year, we have never observed it before. Whereas for Ash Wednesday, we have. So we don't celebrate Christmas for 12 days. We just celebrate it for one day. So I guess, how do you kind of go through the process of deciding this one as a church we'll celebrate, this one we won't? Because we obviously don't do everything. We don't celebrate the day of Epiphany, right? So how do you think through the calendar in that sense?
Well, it's really what your church what you should go through with your church. I mean, I guess we could go to Colossians chapter 2, right? It talks about holidays and things like that. Colossians chapter 2, starting from, I believe, 16.
Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 reads, "Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Let no one disqualify you, insisting on asceticism and worship of angels, going on a detail about visions, puffed up without reason by his sensuous mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the whole body, nourished and knit together through its joints and ligaments, grows with a growth that is from God."
In the end, you want all things to point to Christ. And so that's what you'll do. You let these things point to Christ. Everything that happens is pointing to Christ, especially the Lord's Day. It points to Christ very overtly, right? So whenever you observe a holiday, it's not a legalistic requirement whether you observe something or not, like a new moon, right? Things like that. But it is something that should point to Christ. And so whatever holy day that your church observes or a season that you observe, don't let the world affect you in that sense. I hope that makes sense.
So our consensus on the Christian calendar is it's not bad, it's not the Bible. Do as your church context dictates.
Yeah, I think the tradition, when it points to Christ, it's a nice tradition. Why not? We all have traditions. To say we're going to do bare bones worship structures and seasons, no seasons. We're just going to do just Sundays. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some good in that too. I think that's where we get the Puritan ethics from. But there's also some good in church calendars. Like I said, if you don't do church calendars in your church, I hope you sing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" or "O Come All Ye Faithful."
Maybe in February or something.
Just sing it any time of the year. You're free to do that now. Aren't you happy? But if you're not singing it, then you're missing out some of the greatest worship songs ever created, right?
I think one thing that stood with me, and I had this conversation with you actually a long time ago. I want to say even 5-6 years ago, we had this conversation about even Lent. And I know this topic was brought up because Lent is coming up very, very soon. And I was kind of asking about fasting, why we have to do it, if we have to do it, if we're Protestants and whatnot. And I remember you were saying something along the lines of, if this is an opportunity for our church to fast together as a whole, and we're able to join with the universal church to do this together, then it's a beautiful thing. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's kind of what you had said prior, and that's something that I continue to think about because, I think when you are Presbyterian, when you're Protestant, you think that's Roman Catholic. I'm not going to do that. But not only Roman Catholics do that, Christians around the world do that, and I think this is just a good opportunity. Doesn't mean that you have to celebrate Lent, but it's a great opportunity for us to fast and to withhold certain things and to treasure Christ and the Word. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to do that.
Have you decided what you're fasting?
No, I have not. With that being said, I have not.
I have a suggestion.
I'll probably deny the suggestion.
Chicken. That's good, right? You have to fast chicken.
But chicken, like, are we talking about eggs as well? Because an egg is a baby chicken in a sense.
Everything chicken related. You can't eat chicken feet. You can't eat wings. Do that. You can't eat caviar or chicken nuggets.
Chicken is actually a pretty good one, I think. Because all of us probably eat chicken every day in one sense or another. I guess this is a good quick reminder. What is the benefit of fasting during the Lenten season?
Yeah, I think I also said, not just that part where you mentioned fasting with the church, but is there any other time in the year where you fast? And so if you're complaining about a Lenten fast, is there any other time? If you regularly fast, then that's cool. I mean, good. I mean, maybe you don't even need to partake in the Lenten fast, but I think for the vast majority of Christians out there, when's the last time you fasted on a regular basis?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And what a great opportunity to come together as a church and fast to prepare ourselves for Easter. And so I think that's a good thing. I don't see why this is a bad thing or why that's like given into tradition or legalism when you're like, when's the last time you fasted? I'm not saying you have to fast on certain days. Like we're not fasting Tuesdays and Thursdays like the Pharisees. But when are you fasting? If it's 0, then obviously that's not even adhering to the word of God, because even Jesus says, once I'm gone, they will fast when he was talking about his disciples. Bridegroom. So fasting was a regular part of Christian duty and service, even from the disciples. Now, you as a disciple, when's the last time you fasted? And so I would present that as a challenge. Look, if you regularly fast, and some people say, I'm not going to do a Lenten fast because I fast always in the beginning of the year. I was like, great. I'm glad you fast on January 1st for 21 days or whatever it is. But here's a great way of fasting with the church.
Yep.
Excuse me. Starting from February 18th. Boom. You get to fast with the church, and you could share your prayer requests with each other and saying, I'm going to fast. And these are some of the things that I'm especially going to pray for. Whatever it is in your season, your life, or the community around your family, the world, whatever it is. And you share those things. What a great way to have fellowship. And so I would think that as a positive statement, not necessarily in a legalistic way. Obviously, you could take it in a legalistic way, but I just don't think that's our problem. I don't think people are legalistic in that sense. I think more people are antinomian.
Ooh, disgusting.
And so they think that we could do whatever we want, It's freedom, Christian freedom, and you just don't do anything. So I think that's more of our trend and the likelihood of what people follow, that's like, what is more perpetual in our society. I don't think it's necessarily legalism. Although we keep on preaching against legalism. Great, I'm glad you're preaching against legalism is bad. I mean, show me where people are legalistic and let's get that out. But I think more people, if you're talking about our current milieu, they are more antinomian.
We have a bit more antinomies than anything else, to be honest.
Yeah, they just do whatever they want, that kind of thing, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, what I found to be the culture at our church when we fast, especially for Lent, is people actually tell me people know what they're going to be fasting during Lent. I have one friend that fasts one particular thing every single year. And he talks about it like, I'm going to do the Lenten fast again this year. And I'm going to be fasting the same thing. And he does it every single year.
Are you going to do it with me?
Am I going to?
Are you going to do the Lenten fast that I normally do with me this year?
Well, no, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about something else.
No, I'm just saying, are you going to do it with me?
Not that particular one. Probably not.
Jansuki, you going to do it with me?
Depends what it is.
It's you know what it is. You know what it is.
No, he's not going to do that again.
Yeah, because I did it when I was single. And I did it in the first few years of marriage. After I had a kid, my wife asked me never to do it again. Apparently, I have hanger issues I got to deal with.
Yeah, I used to do a liquid fast every year.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to change it though. I think I'm going to do chicken.
Chicken is a little I think it's a bit tougher.
You already don't like chicken.
I don't like chicken, so
but
that's
there's
like
eggs,
a fast for me.
Eggs.
So that to me is the fast for you. The fast wouldn't be chicken; it would be something that you love. So you would have to fast from chicken. For me, I'm fasting to chicken because I really don't like chicken. I think chicken is like
So you're gonna
The worst.
only eat chicken only, like
Maybe
nothing
things
else.
like a just not beef, no steaks, that kind of thing. No red meat.
Oh,
Yeah, people
That's
do
a Roman
red meat
Catholic
fasts.
thing, no?
Yeah, I love red meat. So if you know me,
Yeah.
I could eat steaks every day. So at one point in my life, I did eat steaks every day.
and so kind of following up with what I was saying, this time is a really good opportunity to keep one another accountable and to just continue to persevere. Because fasting by yourself, yes, it's a discipline, and yes, it's good. Fasting with your friends, fasting with your church, with your family, is really, really beneficial. And I think, like you said, we can share prayer requests. We can continue to pray together. We could read together, and we could withhold from the different things that we were fasting from together. And that has proven to be really, really helpful and encouraging in my experience. So
Yeah, I think you need to be around people who fast regularly. I think you do. I remember growing up and my dad fasting on the regular, and he was one of those 24-hour guys.
yeah.
And so at 12:01 a.m. he was like cooking stuff.
I do that.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I start cooking at 11:50 because it takes about
And then
10 minutes.
he'll cook it up and he'll eat it. And man, it smelled good at like 12 a.m. But I'm more of the sunset kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll just be breakfast will be the breakfast, that kind of thing. But no matter where you are, whether you're 24-hour cycles or the sunrise cycle, I think if you are around people that fast, it almost becomes like, oh, maybe I'll do it. But if you're not around zero people who fast, then fasting is so foreign to you. But again, fasting is a Christian discipline that should be regular. It should be. It's not. And so I think that's an issue with our church. Like prayer and fasting should be a regular discipline of the church. And so, I can assess the health of the church by seeing how many people come out on prayer meetings, how many people fast on during the season of Lent, or if not Lent, then other times. I'm fasting. Could you pray for me? Does that happen? And if it doesn't, perhaps that's an assessment check that you need, not just in your life, but maybe even in your church's life.
Yeah, and this is happening on February 18th. So in 2 days, if you're listening on Monday the 16th. So something for us to consider and think about as well. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. This is our current event section, and today we are discussing Overture 37, which is to amend the Book of Common Order 9-3 in the PCA to allow women to serve as ordained deacons. Now, this was an overture that was submitted by the Pacific Presbytery of the PCA, and I thought this would be an interesting one for us to read because it's not too lengthy. This is what the overture reads. Whereas there has long been a sincere diversity of views among Reformed churches as to what Scripture says about the role of women in diaconal ministry, whereas there seems to be strong evidence that the word diakonon in Romans 16:1 is used in a technical manner to describe an office Phoebe holds rather than in a general descriptive manner, whereas many conservative complementarian scholars understand the biblical texts that touch on the diaconal ministry to allow for women to serve in that role, specifically 1 Timothy 3:11 and Romans 16:1. Whereas women who served as deacons are mentioned as far back as 111 AD and subsequently throughout church history, whereas many conservative Reformed theologians and exegetes have argued that qualified women may be permitted to serve as deacons, whereas the Westminster Confession does not specifically address the office of deacon, whereas the Westminster Confession 20.2 does speak of Christian liberty and not unnecessarily binding the conscience of men, whereas it is in line with the historical spirit of the PCA to be a grassroots denomination and to defer to the judgment of local sessions in decisions regarding congregational ministry, whereas several conservative Reformed denominations, some within the NAPARC, allow women to serve as deacons. For example, the ARP, the Reformed Church of Quebec, the Reformed Presbyterian Church of North America, and the International Presbyterian Church.
Yeah, thanks for reading the whole thing. And then afterwards, they go on through some of the amendments that they're proposing, right,
Yep.
in the BCO.
Yep.
This is from the West Coast or Pacific Presbytery, like you said. It's really interesting, though, and it makes you kind of wonder if they wrote it themselves or if AI wrote it.
I don't know.
You don't understand why I'm saying this. So
No.
the third whereas, you said, whereas many conservative complementarian scholars understand the biblical texts that touch on diaconal ministry to allow for women to serve in that role, specifically 1 Timothy 3:11 and Romans 16:1. I don't think you read the parenthetical section, right?
No, I didn't.
So in that parenthetical section where they go, many conservative complementarian scholars, they actually point to John Piper, Mark Dever, Andreas Kostenberger, and Tom Schreiner.
Yep.
They're Baptist. So if you are making a Presbyterian case and you're saying there's a lot of conservative complementarian scholars, why would you put Baptists in there to make your case that this is evidence? First of all, that's very shoddy. That's a very shoddy pointing to any kind of ground to say that is, evidence at all. You can't be like, look at these guys, they think so too.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Which is just some it could be any random guy. It could be like, whereas Sam Yang believes this. Is like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So they're Baptists. They're not even in your fellowship. If they were in, let's say, a Presbyterian circle like the OPC or something, that's one thing. But not even the OPC. So I just think that was kind of confusing. Did the AI put that in with here are the examples of conservative complementarian scholars? That was weird. But look, this is one of those places where I think I have changed my mind over the years. So I also have repented, just as Carl Trueman did about the seasonal calendar. I've repented about my understanding of women serving in the diaconate. And I am more with, I would say, what people would view as the conservative side now, even, or especially for the diaconate ministry. And so the evidence that, like, this actually makes me think, wow, this is really, really putting some good weight on evidence to never include women in the diaconate ministry. Because what are they pointing to? You have to point to Bible resources, right? The biblical evidence. So let's go to Romans 16:1.
Romans 16:1 reads, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church at Cenchreae. And this is 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 11. Their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. And so I'm assuming they're using the qualification for deacons that Paul is giving to Timothy in 1 Timothy 3, then using the argument that their wives, the gune, is speaking of deaconesses, right? Rather than the wives of the male deacons.
So this is something that we also used in our podcast many years ago.
We did.
And I would like to offer an official retraction of our case for it. The more that you read it, the more that you think about it, the more you see that women's roles were important. But this goes beyond that to say that the office was extended to women. So they take they take Romans 16, which we'll get into right now, as something prescriptive for the church.
Yeah.
It's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. There are two different things. And so when you see the Bible, is it prescriptive or is it descriptive? And you can't mix the two, because you can't take something descriptive and call it prescriptive. But let's look at what it was. What was it a descriptor of? It was a descriptor of Phoebe. And so they actually, in the Greek, used the male form of the noun.
Yep.
Diakonos, right? Which we translate as deacon, which is also an office, but can also mean servant.
Yep.
Right? So on this, everybody assumes that it meant the office of deacon, but there is nothing in the context that would lead you to believe that, unless you already believe that women can be deacons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you already believe that women can be deacons, then like obviously here's another piece of the evidence or whatever it is, another like thing proving this to be the case. Let's go to John chapter 2 and go read verse 5.
John chapter 2, verse 5 reads, "His mother said to the servants, 'Do whatever he tells you.'"
And what is the context?
That's the wedding at Cana.
Yeah, this is a wedding at Cana. So they run out of wine. And then, the mother of Jesus goes to Jesus and says, "Can you help them?" He's like, and he says, "Woman, what does this have to do with me?" Right?
Right.
And then she goes to, and it says, the servants do whatever he tells you, right? So
Yep.
she goes to the wedding servants.
Yep.
What's the word for servants?
Diakonos.
It is diakonos. The word there is diakonos. So are they saying that these servants are deacons, the office of deacon?
Maybe.
Obviously not. This was
Maybe.
before the founding of the office, right? So if you were just going to say anytime it says the word diakonos, it means the office of deacon, you would be sorely mistaken. This was a word that was commonly used to represent servant, and it became a word that represented the office of deacon. I hope that makes sense. So if you're saying, whenever we see the male form of that noun diakonos, it means the office, then you would be mistaken. That's just one place. Is there? I think there's another place I'm trying to get off the top of my head. Paul calls himself even in Romans chapter 1. Let's go there.
Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle set apart.
So
for
there
the
is
gospel of
one
God.
here where it uses the word servant, but he means it as doulos.
Doulos. Yeah.
And so it's also, translated as servant. So whether the English translators, they were trying to figure out, is it doulos? Is it deacon? Which should we translate as the word servant, right? And so I think there's one more. There's one more that I want you to go through in regards to this. And then let me go back to Romans. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's go to 1 Timothy 4:6. That's what it is.
1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6 reads, "If you put these things before the brothers, you will be a good servant of Christ Jesus, being trained in the words of the faith and of the good doctrine that you have followed."
Yeah, and so what's the word servant here translated from? It's from the word diakonos. And let's go to one more when we're talking about diakonos, and I'll get to your question on it. I just want to make sure that we kind of establish a pattern here on the diakonos. All right, here we go. On Romans chapter 13, verse 3 and 4.
Romans chapter 13, verses 3 to 4 reads, "For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer."
So here it says the diakonos theos, servant of God.
Yeah.
So is he talking about the office of deacon, even if it's a very holy position? Obviously not. Obviously not, okay? And so he's speaking broadly in, the world where you would have these magistrates or you have these rulers, and he calls them servants of God, okay?
Yep.
The diakonos of God, diakonos theos. And so does diakonos always mean deacon? The answer should be no. Okay, now let's get to a place where you would see all of this from Romans chapter 1, where he calls himself doulos, and then you start seeing the word diakonos used, and then he goes into Phoebe, right?
Yeah.
In chapter 16.
Yep.
In chapter 16, who was Phoebe? What did Phoebe do?
Phoebe was a servant that was not working, but serving there.
Why was she there? She brought the letter there, okay? So she brought the letter there. And most scholars assume that if you bring the letter there, you're the messenger, you're the message bearer. And so perhaps she even read the letter out loud. So he's saying you should listen to her.
Yeah.
She's going to be reading this to you because she's the one that's bearing that letter to you. Okay, whether you believe it or not, that's secondary. You don't have to necessarily. But what we do know and believe is that Phoebe brought the letter to the Romans. So he gives this very high title for Phoebe because she's that precious. And that's why, we could name our daughters after her and things like that because, they're named after someone who was very precious in the Bible. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So does that mean she has the office of deacon? So for me, I think that's actually counterintuitive. Does that make sense? So she's coming from Paul to the church at Kencray, right?
Yeah.
Why would Paul just all of a sudden send someone that hasn't been approved by the church, who's not part of that local body, and just go, here's a deacon that is ordained for you? That doesn't make any sense to me, because he doesn't do that. If he goes to Miletus and Ephesus, he goes there and then he sets up elders there. Does that make sense? He doesn't go, here's some guys, they're your elders from now. He doesn't actually do that. And so I would say that's actually the counter argument to say that Phoebe, a servant, should be a deacon, because she's not even from that area. She's sent from Paul. Does that make sense?
I also want to retract something that I said. I said that the word that was used for Phoebe, the diakonos in Romans 16:1, was in the masculine form. It's not. It's noun, accusative, singular, feminine. So I want to retract that statement. It's feminine.
Diakonon is a noun, accusative, singular, feminine. This is true.
Yeah.
I was just checking.
No, I just wanted to make sure, because before I said it was masculine, but it is feminine.
So it's not diakonos that he uses.
No.
The actual word is diakonon.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it's reading the Bible in a progressive lens that probably gets us into trouble. And I get it that you could do that, but I would say let's go to first Romans 16:1. It doesn't prove that there should be women deacons at all.
Right.
At all. Even if you don't fully subscribe to whatever we said, you can't say it's prescriptive in the very least. Mm-hmm. It's just descriptive. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 3 then.
So this is the chapter on qualification for elders and deacons. And I think the argument that people normally make for 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 11 is that the word wives is used, and people kind of debate whether this word, gune, is wives or women, because if it was translated women, then you would be talking about deacons who are women, whereas if you translate it as wives, you are talking about the wives of male deacons. And so how you translate that word in particular is going to dictate how you think about the office of deaconess.
Yeah, so what's that verse? You read it.
Yep, it's 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 11. I'll read that for us again. Their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things.
So here is a place where it's actually prescriptive. Paul is prescribing what deacons must be, okay? And so all of a sudden he talks about gune or gunekos, right? Why is he talking about women or wives here? It just seems so random, because he doesn't talk about women
for elders.
No. And all of a sudden he talks about it for deacons.
Yeah.
And so why would there be a prescription for deacons' wives? It must be because it's not wives that he's talking about, it's just women, right? So that's the argument. That makes sense?
So not even related to deacons, you're saying?
So this is just a separate thing for women. So that's why the aforementioned men that we saw that was like, contemporary conservative Christian scholars, whatever, Mark Dever was mentioned. Mark Dever doesn't call his women deacons. He calls them deaconesses. And so that's not a case for women deacons. He calls them deaconesses, and he doesn't ordain them. I think, it's taking the ball too far on this.
So are you saying that in that context, in Mark Dever's context, there's three offices?
Three choices that you could interpret gune as.
I see.
So it could either be wives, or it could just be
wives of deacons,
right?
Number one,
or deaconesses.
Deaconesses number two,
or the office of deacon.
The office of deacon who are women.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's making a distinction between women deacons and deaconesses then?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Because deacons are in the first part.
Right.
And then you have the deaconesses in the second part.
Okay.
So his church actually has deaconesses. And look, if you interpret it that way, then, I'm not going to judge you necessarily. But here's the classic interpretation. Again, there are other people that, I sent you guys a little blog post on someone who wrote about Warfield.
BB.
Yeah. And so he had his take on it. And, those are all just interesting things that we could see throughout church history. People always have interesting insights and comments on it, which I think is good. I think it's good that we get to see the plethora of resources out there that can help us understand some things that may not be as clear. But here's some evidence to support, let's say, this being their wives, okay? Why he said wives, I'll get into later, but this would translate into wives because verse 12.
Verse 12. So verse 11, I think it helps to read both. So 11 is their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Then 12 says, let deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their own households well.
Yeah, so that's a qualification. If you want to be a deacon, you need to be a husband of one wife.
Yep.
That makes no sense for a woman. You can't
Yep.
be a husband of one wife.
Right.
And be a deacon, so they can say he switched modes. So an argument can be made he switched modes from the office of deacon to a deaconess, and then back to the office of deacon.
Yeah.
So that's Mark Dever's argument. I would say that that's a little convoluted, and I hope I'm trying to be as gracious in my explanation as possible. It's only convoluted is because he's switching roles back and forth. It makes most sense if you take it smoothly, which means wives, their women or their wives likewise. And then, so the question could be, why do deacons' wives have some criteria put on them?
But not elders.
And not elders,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the cases that were brought forth is Paul especially wants their wives to be dignified because in the distribution, their wives will almost 100% be involved for the office of deacon, whereas the office of elder, wives aren't preaching, right? They're not doing the preaching,
Right.
Just the elders are. But in the office of deacon and service, their wives are 100% going to be involved in the distribution because, husbands are not going to. Paul, knowing this, he adds this qualification for their wives. So that's, again, the argument for this being prescriptive only to men for the office.
So what you're saying then in your explanation is that the office of deacon will require at some point, based on just what you do as a deacon, will require the support of the deacon's wife as well. So whether you are distributing goods or food to the widows, which they were first designed for, or whether you are visiting the sick, whether they're single women or not, wives will be involved with the deacons in that ministry.
I think they have to be. Let's go to a place where it is prescriptive. And you don't have to turn to it, but I'll just explain it to you in Acts chapter 6. So this is prescriptive in the sense they actually showed you the prescription. They showed you what they went through to get these deacons, right?
Yep.
And so what was the case? The case where the Hellenist widows didn't get their fair share. So they put a complaint out to the disciples. And the disciples, because of that, arose from the disciples this new office of deacons there.
They selected men.
They selected 7 men. If it, we could get into if he wanted women, why didn't they do it from the start? Oh, it's because they're all misogynist. It's like that's a tough one for me from the beginning, and so that's a tough one. I suppose you could hold to that belief, but then I think you'll probably hold that for everything. Everybody's misogynistic then, for not having women. Everybody's misogynist in the Old Testament for not having as many women as you could have besides Huldah and, Deborah or something like that. And so I think that's a tough one for me to think. And if you hold to that view, you probably think that everybody's misogynistic in the Bible, which is a very, very, very challenging position to hold, in the very least. Now, what I wanted to get to was the practicality of it. Let's say there are widows out there, especially young widows, and they're going to have a distribution, you're going to be intimate with the people that you distribute. It's not just like mailboxes that you just drop off. Most of the time, you're handing it over to them. There's going to be ministry involved. You're going to be praying for them. If it's a female widow, I would highly advise, especially in the culture back then, but even now, highly advise against a man going in there alone to a widow's house and spending like hours and hours with her, ministering to her alone. Who do you need? You need your wife.
Right.
Okay. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it does make sense in that sense. I hope everything there was pretty clear.
So Brian actually brought this up, which I think is pretty helpful too. But the gunekos that's used in verse 11, their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Verse 12, we read, let deacons each be the husband of one gunekos. So wives would make sense in verse 11.
Yeah, it could go. I mean, gune could mean
Women.
wife or woman.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. It's a possessive. It's their woman, right? Their woman. So
But perhaps the easiest reading
is
would
if
be
both are wives.
Right. If it's one after the other.
Yeah,
Perhaps
and that's where the ESV translates it both as wives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of flip mode. That was my argument. It's hard to like flip it and say all of a sudden here it means deaconess because
Right.
it just means women, and
Then
here
one
it means
verse
wife.
later. Right.
Yeah, and so, but then what's clear, even if you believe there's a flip, what's clear is deacons, their qualification is a husband of one wife. Mm-hmm. So there's that, right? So, you could even make the case that unless there's a very, very special exception, which you probably don't want to always do, if you're not married, you can't be a deacon either.
If you aren't married.
Yeah, how can you be deacon? Because you can't fulfill this qualification. Husband of one wife. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So even in the pastoral ministry, when I was being examined, I was single at the time, and this was with the PCA. This is way before. This is like 10 plus years ago. They said, our question for you is, why aren't you married? Do you want to take a psych exam? And then I said, I would love to take a psych exam. And so we got along pretty well back then. So those are very valid questions I think we should ask any kind of ordination candidate.
Yeah. Wait, so what then is the, I guess, response to that for someone that is not married? Because our church, we have male deacons that are not married.
Do we? How many? That's it? But he will be married, so he'll be fine.
But even before then, Josh Finance wasn't married.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where in our church, we thought that this is a position that needs to be filled, and single people can fulfill it because they are not a husband of more than one wife. So this is not a qualification to be married, because in the end, if someone's, I was going to say the word abstinent. That's the right word, right? Celibate, that's it. Everybody should be abstinent before marriage. If someone has a vow to celibacy, can they not serve as an elder or deacon? The answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Classically, traditionally speaking, that's not how the church necessarily read it.
Right.
But is it good that if they're not celibate, should they be married? Now I think it would be a strong precursor to them being accepted or passing the test that they are married.
So for our church's context, what you're saying is we had a need. These were qualified men that were not yet married. And so we decided to go with these men because although they were not a husband, they were qualified. And it's not like they were not the husband of one wife.
Right.
Like they have two wives.
The
or
more
three wives.
classic understanding is you can't be polygamous. Not that you have to be married.
I see.
Because if that were the case, then, celibate people couldn't be ordained.
Right.
Right. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that
right.
makes sense.
But if someone isn't celibate, should we push them to get married? Yes.
Yeah,
right. Before being an ordinand, all the Reformed denominations do it. But do they ordain ministers that aren't married yet? Absolutely, they do. They do. But you go through extra heavier testing because you're single.
So I think a question that someone may have is, when you look at our church, we've had women deacons before, and we do have a woman deacon now. So I guess, how is our view being practiced in a sense? I guess, do we still believe in women deacons, or do we not no longer believe in that?
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's a matter of the whole understanding of deacon. I think we are becoming reformed. We are reformed. And so understanding deacon isn't simply about assigning deacons according to gender. It's understanding the whole office of deacon. So this is all part of our repentance, including mine, in our understanding. We thought deacons in the past were functionally just ministry leaders. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because in our church, that's what we did. So if you are a ministry leader of this area, then you should be a deacon. That's not what a deacon is. A deacon isn't a ministry leader. And I wanted to move our church's understanding of deacon away from ministry leader. So if you are leading the women's ministry, it's weird to say, I'm going to have a male deacon over it, because male deacons or any deacon, their function isn't to lead the women's ministry.
Right.
That's not what they're there to do. They're servants of the distribution. They should be there for, what we now interpret as mercy ministry, and taking care of the building. So those are two classic ways of understanding some of the functions of the deacon, role or their responsibilities. Our church never did that. So we are reforming again away from the more pragmatic understanding of deacon to now functionally a more biblical understanding of deacon. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in that, the gender stuff will come in, but for me, that honestly comes with the understanding of deacon. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I've had PCA ministers come up to me and say, we have women deacons in our church. We just don't ordain them, right? We don't ordain them as deacons. Okay, so functionally, you call them deacons, though. Like, practically, you call them deacons. It's like, yeah, we do. So we even had people like that. Obviously, the PCA is cracking down on it, which I think is good. I think people just should have one thing, right? One thing that we should see in a church. So the PCA being a church, they shouldn't have a whole plethora of their definitions of what a deacon is. So I'm glad that they're cracking down and honing in on what it should be. And our church, because we're not part of a denomination, we're kind of trying to figure it out. And so I don't think that we should absolutely follow the OPC or the PCA or the ARP or the SBC. I don't think we should absolutely follow them. I think they could be a guiding hand in what we do, but we're not bound to their strictures. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so those are things that I think we're going to do. But for me as a pastor, it's a teaching mechanism where if we're going to move from one lane to another, what you do is you turn on the signal, you see if there are any cars, you wait till there's enough space for you to go into the next lane, and then you slowly move on to the next lane. I don't think it's very wise to just be like, oh, this says this, and then just swerve your car to the right lane.
I see.
Just because you need to be on the right lane. I know drivers like that, and they're very bad drivers. And so a lot of the things is you want to make sure your whole church comes along for the ride. They're coming along with you in the understanding. You want to teach this more broadly and then have people come over. Does that make sense? Yeah. So just because you get it doesn't mean the whole church will go along with it, right? You get it, you got to teach it, and you move together. I think that is a more healthy way of moving the church toward a more reformed confessional view.
Gotcha. So in the context of the PCA, is this Overture 37 something that was passed, or is this something that's still going to be going to the floor for vote? Or
I do not think that it will pass in the PCA. Anybody can bring up an overture and it needs to go through the overture committee. They're going to clean up the language there, make sure it's good. I hope they take out the names of John Piper and Thomas Schreiner and Mark Dever. It's so useless. But I hope they take out their names in the final overture. But once it goes to the GA floor, they're gonna vote on it as it stands. If they pass in the GA, then it goes back to the presbyteries The presbyteries have to vote with a 2/3 majority, and then they have. So that's a supermajority, and then they bring it back to the GA again. So the chances of it passing, I think, are very slim. So I wouldn't think that this is something to worry about in the PC. Again, not a prophet. I just don't think it's going to pass. I think that's a good thing, though. If you want to stay conservative, make sure any changes you need to do, it needs to be really like a very high bar, right?
Yeah, it's we will see what happens, and this is happening in June.
Whenever the next GA is, yeah.
I think it's somewhere in the summer, so I guess we'll be following along and seeing what happens there. Thank you, Pastor Eugene. I think that's helpful, especially as we, like you said, continue to reform according to the scriptures, even as Dr. Carl Trueman did, and as we do even today, aligning our beliefs and our traditions to the Word of God. And so we continue to do that as the church reformed, always reforming. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.